our speaker this morning. It's Miss Elana Koehler. Elena's attended Augusta Prep beginning of the 7th grade. Since then, she's been quite active on campus. The newly found Harry Potter Club would not know what to do without her magical talent as co-president. Elena's secretary for Schools. She's vice president of the Spanish Club and the public relations officer for the Science Club. Elana can also be found acting and singing in both the theater and the chorus. And if you're an observer, you might actually find Elana spiritly running on the cross-country trail. After running over 5 miles this morning myself, I seem to be rather hungry. If only I had something to eat. What? Oh look, someone inconspicuously placed a baguette in this podium. Whoever it is, Mr. Mag, Mr. Kerr, I truly thank you. Elena's special guests this morning include her parents, Taryn Ward-Keller, her red-headed wonder kid soccer-playing brother Nathan, and her grandmother Kathleen Katarinchik. Help me in giving them a warm welcome. Man, I really am hungry. If only I had an apple pastry. How fortuitous! An apple pastry in here. I can't believe it. Lena's only been a part of my advisory this year, but has quickly become a young lady after my own heart. She lists her hobbies as watching Nate on the soccer field. You all should do likewise. And reading books. You all should do likewise. And now, for your listening pleasure and your brain's benefit, I give you Miss Elana Koehler.
Before I get into the main topic of my speech, I would like to ask all of you a question. How many of these foods do you think are gluten-free? 5? 4? Out of all of these everyday foods, only one is gluten-free. So what is gluten? According to WebMD, gluten is, quote, a protein found in wheat, barley, or rye, end quote. So some general examples of foods that contain gluten are breads, pastries, pastas, and most fried foods. Why is gluten significant to my speech? Here's the story. About 9 years ago, my mom started getting rashes on her elbows. Though at first she thought the bumps were really hard to see, and she thought she might be going crazy, she went to see a dermatologist. He biopsied or took a sample of the skin on her elbows to check for a lot of rash-related illnesses, because at the time she worked retail pharmacy and came into contact with lots of communicable diseases every day. But he couldn't find a definite cause. So he advised my mom to start removing foods from her diet for periods of time to see if the rashes went away. She started with peanuts, strawberries, and chocolate until she finally tried cutting out gluten. At the time, I was almost 9 and Nate was 8. We did not really understand what gluten was or why Mom no longer ate sandwiches, spaghetti, or pizza with us. But as she continued to avoid gluten, her rashes appeared to be vanishing more and more. So she continued not to eat it. That sounds simple enough, right? Just don't eat that thing that causes your health issues. But gluten has permeated its way into our society and is present in many more foods and other items than people realize. For instance, everyday health lists beauty products and even medications as potential offenders because the gluten protein is used to help bind the products together. For a person who is sensitive to gluten, using these products can cause irritation to the face, lips, or eyes. Luckily, more companies are becoming aware of gluten sensitivities and are producing products that are gluten-free. 2 of the more well-known makeup brands creating this type of product are Eyes, Lips, and Face, or e.l.f., and Too Faced Cosmetics. Determining which foods are gluten-free can be really tricky, because while it makes no sense for there to be gluten in them, there is anyway. A few of these examples include wraps, certain granola bars, Twizzlers, and Rice Krispies. Rice Krispies, if they're made of mostly sugar and crisp rice, where's the gluten? The answer lies in the malt flavor. Malt is normally made from barley, a grain known to contain gluten. Over the past 9 years, my entire family has become accustomed to identifying foods that that are gluten-free and those that are not. My mom has definitely not had it easy. Simple things such as finding a restaurant on the way home from a soccer tournament become a lot more difficult when you have to be on the lookout for a place that might have something gluten-free. From experience, I can say without a doubt that there are two types of responses when you ask about gluten-free dishes. Well, the salad is gluten-free, or, gluten? Which are fine the first couple times you go out to dinner, but quite discouraging to hear every time one goes to a restaurant. Since removing a certain ingredient from one's diet can be a big adjustment, my family and I have tried to find gluten-free alternatives to the foods Mom could eat before she made gluten-free. Luckily, companies that make gluten-free foods have been on the rise over the past few years, most likely due to the increasing prevalence of gluten intolerance and celiac disease. As such, we did find quite a few options. Some of our favorites include Char gluten-free bread, Barilla gluten-free pasta, and King Arthur gluten-free brownie and cake mixes. When I say these are favorites, I mean that they're the best tasting alternatives we've found so far, not that they're all fantastic. These are foods which Mom tasted and said, that's not too bad. It's pretty well known that a lot of gluten-free food doubles are not exquisite. In fact, I asked some of my classmates what their opinion was of gluten-free foods. Kylie Gratz responded simply that, quote, gluten-free pizza does not exist, which is just false. Largely known companies like Papa John's have begun to carry gluten-free options more recently. Eliza Williams admitted that, quote, honestly, it's not terrible, but like, I want real dough for my pizza, dude, end quote. Thirdly, Chad Perry emphasized that, quote, gluten-free food is what happens when you take a good food and remove all the emotion. The taste is there, but it just isn't good, end quote. So, why is gluten-free food earned this terrible reputation? Well, since wheat flour is often the ingredient that binds or thickens foods, gluten-free foods must replace it with a different type of flour. A few commonly used options are almond flour, buckwheat flour, and corn flour. These are good substitutes, but do not often provide a strong bind within the food, leaving a lot of gluten-free foods crumbly messes. Other times, a bad ratio of these flours can create a rubbery texture, as my mom and I experienced making those brownies. You may also find gluten-free foods to be really tough, like these gluten-free multigrain crackers. Every once in a while, however, the perfect balance of flours can be mixed so well within the food that you almost can't tell it's gluten-free. For example, Grace Newsom said, quote, the gluten-free muffins your mom made us after Hopo were the bomb. More recently, after doing some research and talking with doctors, my mom decided to get tested for celiac disease. A lot of you may be wondering, what is celiac disease? According to the Celiac Disease Foundation, celiac disease is, quote, a serious autoimmune disorder that can occur in genetically predisposed people where the ingestion of gluten leads to damage in the small intestine, end quote. According to the University of Chicago Celiac Disease Center, symptoms of celiac disease can include chronic gastrointestinal issues being the most common, dermatitis herpetiformis, fatigue, and iron deficiency anemia that does not respond to iron therapy, among others. If left unchecked, celiac disease complications can include malabsorption, vitamin deficiency, and irritation of the intestines that can lead to lymphoma. According to the doctor, the rash on Mom's elbows appears to be dermatitis herpetiformis, a common symptom of celiac disease. Normally, when a doctor suspects a patient has celiac, the first step is to administer a blood test to check for antibodies against tissue transglutaminase. If there are high levels of these antibodies, then the patient undergoes genetic testing to look for the HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8 genes. And finally, the patient may undergo an endoscopy to check for intestinal damage from the disease. On the opposite side of the spectrum, when someone has already been on a gluten-free diet, testing for the disease becomes slightly more complicated. For my mom, this meant that a blood test would not show any antibodies to gluten because she wasn't eating it. So she had a genetic test first, which revealed that she has the HLA-DQ2 gene, but not the other celiac gene, HLA-DQ8. The presence of either of these two genes means you could possibly have celiac disease, whereas a lack of these genes means you will not have the disease. Although not everyone with the HLA-DQ2 or HLA-DQ8 gene will go on to have celiac, it is estimated that those with the HLA-DQ2 gene have a 10% higher probability than those without the gene of developing the disease. Those who carry both HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8 have about 14 times the normal population risk. After taking a blood test for the gene, gluten-free patients will have to change their diet temporarily. The website Beyond Celiac explains that, quote, if you cut gluten out of your diet before undergoing testing, your body will begin to heal and tests will be unreliable. People who have already adopted the gluten-free diet without having been tested for celiac disease can undergo a gluten challenge in order to receive more accurate test results. In a gluten challenge, the person to undergo testing must eat a certain amount of gluten as designated by their doctor every day, usually for up to 8 weeks. My mom is currently on her gluten challenge. While she was excited to get to eat some of her favorite foods again, the symptoms she experienced before going gluten-free have returned once more. After eating gluten for 8 weeks, most people undergoing testing will have an endoscopy to check for damage to the intestines as a result of the disease. There is no miracle cure for celiacs. The most recommended treatment for a celiac diagnosis is to live a gluten-free lifestyle. Luckily, over the past 9 years, my family and I have been learning all the small but important details that come with living with someone who is completely gluten-free. This includes our separate gluten-free toaster, pans, and waffle maker. We've had an amazing time finding gluten-free recipes to make together, and have even visited gluten-free restaurants in other countries. It's encouraging to find so many restaurants with gluten-free options because it's estimated that celiac disease affects around every 1 in 100 people across the world. My mom and I have always been a team, so this April, over spring break, I decided that I would go gluten-free so that she had someone to go through all this with her. At first, it was pretty hard to give up foods I was so used to having. I won't lie, I definitely craved pizza and peanut butter and jelly for the first couple weeks. But I've experienced great benefits along the way, such as having more energy and being more conscious of the ingredients in the foods I put into my body. Celiac disease is genetic, so if my mom's next tests come back positive, there is an increased likelihood that I will have it too. Now, I'm not going to say that everyone should go gluten-free, but while most of you probably don't have celiacs, there will come a point in our lives where we each have to deviate from our normal routines. Maybe it will be a food restriction, a move to a new area or school, or adjusting to a new job. For the class of 2019, it'll be a move to college next year. Sometimes things can become overwhelming and frustrating. Be as open to new things as you can, and if a situation isn't exactly how you wanted, remember to breathe, appreciate all the people in your life supporting you, and soon you'll realize that's not